So hi everyone. So thank you ArchiNet for organizing this conference. Welcome everyone. So let me introduce the lecture. So I'll introduce myself. So Hassan Radoine. I'm actually currently a full professor of architecture, city planning, and then the director of the School of Architecture, Planning and Design at University Mohammed VI Polytechnic, Ben Gurir in Morocco. What I do mean by cultural resilience in architectural innovation. Actually, the advances of technology and, of course, the advances in the systems of industrialization of the built environment, we are witnessing more and more the simplification of the methods of construction through engineering and advanced engineering and the whole advanced research into materials. But unfortunately, these advances, sometimes they are not aligned with the design processes and what we get as an outcome in terms of cultural experience. And what I'm here presenting the first slide, and this first slide shows clearly that in our region, I mean the region, the North Africa and Middle East mainly, with where this notion of culture is always sensitive and we are always attached to our cultural history, cultural memory. So the architecture is always resistant to certain formalistic forms like the arc and the dome, and of course, and some musharabi and all the vocabularies that they are epitomizing kind of Arabic or let's say Islamo-Arabic architecture into the scene, the contemporary scene of modern contemporary architecture. And what we see here, this is a photograph that I took in Dubai. It shows in the backyard the scale of a standardized, highly advanced structural system that is giving us birth to the Burj Khalifa as the highest building, which is actually more like a trademark for the international trademark for Dubai as a city, as a global city. But next to it, we have the social or the housing scale where local communities, they are trying all the time to reveal or reminisce about local antecedent, local vocabulary of architecture. So this contrast is not only in Dubai, everywhere in the MENA region, we see this kind of existence of this dichotomy. That means we are aspiring to be very global, very international, but at the same time, we want to be local and, of course, try to emulate traditional or forms that they are actually culturally identified as Arabo-Islamic. So this question of this contrast is always bringing key questions. I'm trying here to get. So the second slide, to provoke my audience more, this is a wonderful fiction image done by Sid Mead, is an art and architectural critique in New York Times about Doha, the city of Doha in 2050. And it shows that Doha in the near future will be like a sci-fi city where all the forms, they will be futuristic with extraterrestrial ships on the skies and of course these champagne glasses as buildings. And this shows exactly that this question of advanced architecture via technology and aspiring for more kind of abstract forms will lead to a decontextualized architecture and city form from its anchorage, from its local contextual anchorage, and this would lead certainly to a gap between memory and the future of buildings and architecture, and how it would be mainly in Doha and other cities in the Gulf. I'm not here generalizing. So the key question: how to cope between these two dimensions? This dimension of augmented design, leading to futuristic design that may be not about the human experience. It may bring its own augmented human experience. I'm not saying no, because this is the beauty of architectural creativity. It may create its own human experience within a space that is newly designed. But in the same time, there is a fear that there would be a rupture between a cultural memory and its future. And the Gulf cities that have known this phenomenon for decades now. This is another extreme slide that I want to share with the audience, and this is only to show how problematic is the international design or star architect. Here you have this crescent moon tower that was envisaged or designed by Libeskind, and you could see that the formalistic kind of design trying to borrow kind of symbol as they make clay, a symbol of Islam, though there is no empirical text that says that the crescent moon is actually the symbol of Islam, but observing that crescent moon every month. And here an international designer making it as a building in Dubai. Thanks God this was not be implemented, but it clearly show this problem of how to get inspired from cultural antecedents, not cultural experience of the people themselves, but taking their kind of pastiche-like forms and making them buildings. Certainly in terms of engineering, this building reveals a lot of structural systems innovations and the materials and of course glass and everything. But in terms of locality, it may also create a problem that culture cannot be interpreted through formalistic form as a symbol. This is another slide. This is another slide which is very important, and it shows that just 1 minute, please. This slide shows actually that Muhammad Ali, an amazing young architect, Emirati architect actually, who I really admire, ex-architect's office in Dubai. And Muhammad is a graduate of the US, American University of Sharjah, and he's done a lot of projects since he's Emirati. And he tried to give a new interpretation of this locality or this local environment into the design process. And here there is an amazing project of a zoo in the landscape, and how he's interpreting a whole landscape to create an architecture. And it's an emulation of oasis in the middle of harsh dry climate of the desert. And we know how the milieu in a lieu, which is oasis, create life. And I think this project, one of the kind of sensitive interpretation of local landscape and environment to generate a new human experience without having a heritage site or any cultural materiality as in the heritage part. Another slide as a provocation before I get to the key smart questions about this lecture. This is Souq Waqif that I evaluated when I was a technical reviewer with the Aga Khan Award of Architecture, with which I was joined for almost 12 years, reviewing projects, going on the sites. So when I went to Souq Waqif first to do the evaluation, I was so impressed by the architect designer Muhammad Ali, who here there are lots of issues around the Souq Waqif. Is it reconstructed heritage, fabricated heritage, as Nizar Sayyad, of course, argued about the fabricated heritage. But the most important thing, regardless of the style of rehabilitation, restoration, or fabrication, or reconstruction, but it's clearly Souq Waqif is generating an amazing cultural experience, an amazing human experience, is the only open air kind of market for the community of Doha beside those skyscrapers and beside the malls, the fancy malls. And this is another argument that through maybe not emulating the past like Souq Waqif, but what kind of architectural innovation that would lead such a human interaction, human experience, sense of place and sense of belonging, and which kind of a new cultural meaning, not from the past or the romanticizing the old heritage, but what is the new heritage? This is another argument that we need to raise. So the key questions I'm sharing with you here: how to counter this pastiche-like formalism, like the crescent moon, to regenerate a true cultural and environmental experience. How to explore the dynamic and living cultural memory in innovative design. And I am very careful with my words because I came from cultural heritage and then I moved to technology, and now in my our new school at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, we are believing more in cultural synergy linked to the design processes, and thanks to technology, what kind of future we can prospect for our resilient territories. So therefore, how can we capture this living cultural memory, not the tangible fragments of historicism, but rather a dynamic cultural memory through an innovative design process that can actually lead to something really amazing of the future, but still has roots into the cultural elements. So the third question: what are the new cultural meanings sought in an augmented design? And I don't want to redefine what means augmented. We heard this term several times, especially linked to augmented city, augmented reality. But I would I dare use here augmented design, because thanks now to the digital, to the intelligence, artificial intelligence, design is not anymore classic. We're not using only CAD and AutoCAD now, just like tools of drawing, but we can move far to twin digital, augmented reality, and virtual reality to even simulate cultural experience. So through this augmented design, what kind of new cultural meanings they may generate for the near future? Very few ask this question, because we are all entrenched and sometimes trapped by the romanticism of the past, or maybe we are very avant-gardist, pursuing the tabula rasa, that we don't care at all about the past. But this is actually an ancient new problem of the modernist agenda, making a culture and heritage or any cultural meaning as an antithesis of a democratic architecture, as I may quote here Le Corbusier and other ones. How to reach a cultural anchorage without discarding the positive global input? I think this is a legitimate question. Global input or globalization or globalism, you can name them as you want, but the global forces, they are there and we cannot stop them. Yet this globalism may bear in its womb some negative outputs, but yet there are also some advantages of this globalization. So with this global force, what kind of cultural anchorage? It may sound antagonistic, but indeed there is a link, and sometimes this anchor in terms of cultural innovation can create also a global image by being universal, but universal based on uniqueness and based on quality. So the last question: how to explore new advanced technologies for genuine architectural innovation adapted to local cultures. And you could see that I'm not here involving only architects, but I'm involving engineers, I'm involving environmentalists, I'm involving energy specialists, etc. Because the architecture now cannot be seen just for the Beaux-Arts dimension of croquis or esquisse, but it's actually a complex construct. And these new technologies, they are advancing this innovation, and how these innovation solutions can be adopted culturally in every site. So these are the questions. And now to move on with this amazing slide, and I thank in Safarkusi, the artists who work with me on the illustrations for my book, for having some amazing kind of caricatures and kind of drawings that just to maybe sometimes to exaggerate in a caricature, just to convey a message. Here it's illustration showing all the parachuted high-rise buildings in Dubai or Doha, and this local human scale of the local tradition or local communities, and they are asking where they are coming from. I am very careful in terms of my academic argumentation, please. I want to alarm everyone on the audience. I'm not here generalizing, essentializing, or criticizing the Gulf architecture. Now the Gulf states or the Gulf cities, they are laboratories maybe for future innovative architecture. I'm not saying no for that. I'm just here in terms of academic argumentation, trying to construct a discourse around this architecture that is not yet contextualized. So we can see these fragments, but they may not constitute an urban fabric. And we know that based on cultural experience, the Medinas, they created an urban fabric, and within the urban fabric, there is an architecture, and may also go to an amazing scholar, Vittorio Grigotti, in his book, Inside Architecture, and he never, and the Italian school is to be advocated in that sense, architecture never been fragmented or isolated from its environment, context, fabric, etc. So therefore, this international kind of advanced, I may dare, very advanced in terms of engineering, but how they would fit and which kind of temporality they need to create their own culture. And of course, architecture that would not create a culture is not a true architecture, because architecture is all about human interaction, human communication, human, of course, sense of belonging, and that create always an experience, and that experience is codified through the tradition, customs, etc. So architecture was always a vehicle of that, and we cannot discard this dimension from this new coming high-tech buildings and how this would actually be adapted in the near future. And has the question of continuity or discontinuity with this architecture. There is the second point before I elaborate, some trends of cultural meaning of architectural innovation. There is an issue of pedagogy of how we educate architects nowadays. Since 1900, actually, the classic schools of architecture, mainly they were about artistic talent, because the architect, they needed artistic expression to get that baby or that building from the abstraction to reality or to be material. But the problem is that this education has limited the architect student to look only to sun orientation and surface topography and the plot. And we are all maneuvering at the scale of 1 to 100. And then we escaped a whole spectrum that the building is part of the district is part of the city, or maybe the building is part of the landscape. It doesn't matter, urban or rural, and therefore we don't actually train our architecture students on all layers. Where is the social and communal layer? Where is the cultural layer? Where is the physical? We are maneuvering only in the physical one, and then of course the biological layer now with all the questions of resilience and sustainability, and then the environmental layer. So therefore we need to be very careful how to train future architects not to be imprisoned in the design processes for the sake of design. And design as a creative engine to produce and reproduce buildings needs to be, of course, having a content or a certain kind of multifaceted vision of the architect in order to create augmented the environmental cultural realities that they are not all respecting locality in terms of romanticism or identity. As you may notice, I'm not using even the term identity because it's over, though we may debate about this. So now this, what cultural construct in terms of design? This is a big argument and the real issue. Always we think we architects as designers, we can conceive everything around schemata. And we know that issue of schemata for the green, the garden city, Ebenezer Howard, and all the theories around how the cities, they were dismantled to be schemes or buildings to be just organigram or just like a drawing schema in French. And that created a real problem of diminishing building cities to a set of 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of concepts. And this actually never reveals the holistic side of the cultural construct and how it would be interpreted in the design processes. I'm just giving you here a couple of examples. I'm not saying that these examples, they are ideal. Please, the audience, don't get me wrong. I am always following my academic argumentation in terms of constructive criticism to more convey a message for you rather than to get identified with one architect or one school or one trend. Though this is actually a beautiful example of Diwan architects. I liked actually how the motif will become, or the ornament will become, a structural system. I'm not saying this is the most that you need to take as a model, absolutely not, but this is just argumenting with you. So this is what kind of cultural borrowing we will do. Is it formalistic? We take ornaments or you take elements from the past and then we try to convert them to modern structural systems and keep that kind of symbolism? This is a question. So a close in the understanding of a given cultural setting that involves languages, customs, memory, place, and lifestyles is highly acquired in a conscious design. But however, which kind of design and which kind of borrowing from the past? Yet, I would just end through this slide by saying this augmented kind of ornament through this innovative design for provoking the users and the observers regarding the future architecture of the mosque, it may generate an experience, a very important new experience, because we cannot actually be imprisoned in the past, and because of the mosque, they had only wooden pillars or mud brick or sun-dried bricks or the classical timber, and hence, thanks to technology, why not to revolutionize that architecture of the mosque? But again, this also will let us see how this would be adopted by the users or the ones praying there. The second idea that is, or concept I want to discuss with you, which kind of symbolic codes, which kind of cultural value judgment? Why I'm saying that? This is deeper than me, an architect or a designer, based from my ego or self-centered view. I will get a cliche of that cultural fragment. This is more the user expression of that culture through a value that is adopted by the user, but not from the artist or designer or the architect that will synthesize the culture to a certain fragments and make them a whole project. And hence the importance of symbolic codes. What means the difference between a code, symbolic code, that means a form that has repeated throughout time of history and a symbol because of its own value and its own cultural meaning among the community, or because it was duplicated in different parts of the Islamic Arabic world, and then it becomes a code or it becomes a symbol. But whatever we will say here in this slide, clearly in this kind of architecture, we see the imprints, we see the traces, we see the human experience, And there is no problem at all of aestheticism, like in our modern mindset. We want to fabricate the aesthetic. Here, the aesthetic is revealed by the experience itself, and may create an amazing cultural experience. And this, and also behavioral pattern. We could even be oriented on how this space would be used and occupied. But I am not here, please, romanticizing these forms. I'm just asking questions like I'm asking below, and to just mention very few. Can the architectural and urban fabric foster a cultural message? How do both users and designers share symbolic codes that a project may transmit? It's not just about a designer designing from tabula rasa or from vein, but what kind of transmission between the two to generate a common ground design? How can we judge whether a project has a cultural value? Are there cognitive schemata for deduced or preconceived behavioral patterns that charge a design with a cultural load? Or just like what we witnessed with the modernists, where every building becomes like a concrete box devoid of any symbol or any meaning? I'm not here advocating that we go to ornaments and pastiche like we witness in some of the buildings in the MENA region. So the other thing around this link between architecture, cultural expression, and then representation in architectural project or architectural design process. On the right side, it's culture, but it's another culture. It's a reinvented kind of memoirs of travel of Ibn Battuta, and we want to encapsulate this travel from an abstract manuscript and then making it an architecture like in the Ibn Battuta Mall, right side. So I'm not judging if it's bad or no, for certainly it is designed to attract more customers in a mall, but they will give you a flavor of culture and the experience of Ibn Battuta while you're shopping in your Nike or you're going to your Starbucks. And they, by the way, enjoy Starbucks in Ibn Battuta Mall because you have this beautiful, amazing Persian cupola above the Starbucks space. So you're drinking your Starbucks coffee under the Persian cupola. Or maybe the left side slide of a little street in the Chefchaouen in the north of Morocco, where community members, they designed their alley, and it's amazing to see the public space is also designed as an interior. So this also a cultural memory. So the sense of neighborhood, the sense of being together, and this togetherness and being connected or connectedness of the community is created also on aesthetic. So hence the three main elements of this cultural expression into, be it in the existing or the futuristic design, what kind of representation, what kind of transmission, and what kind of integration. What I mean by representation is very hard, especially for architects and designers. How can we epitomize a cultural experience into a croquis or into an esquisse or into a drawing or into a visual elements? And what kind of cultural transmission you want this medium, visual medium, or this medium of design do you want to have? And what kind of integration within the community? Because at the end of the day, as architects, we are designing for communities and territories, and we need that our project get accepted, adopted by the community at the end of the day. I'm not with this kind of the architects. Of course, there are some very good architects, but I'm just saying the individualistic, the ego-centered architect that I will create something that never happened before. It can be, this is what is innovation. However, what kind of integration of the user? Because at the end of the day, we are not actually abstract artists, fixing our things in a museum wall, but we are giving those buildings to users. So this is why it's important here to inject the terms of resilience. There is a resilience of cultural meaning, we like it or not, whatever we design, even it's totally modernistic, abstract, tabula rasa, the users, they are always looking for their own memory, we like it or not. So instead of having this gap and this rupture that is moving and growing, so what kind of resolution, I'm not saying here that we are handcuffing architects and designers for not to be creative, please don't get me wrong, but what kind of genuine cultural idioms we can actually explore. And just an example, the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, just a beautiful project that I really admire from P. When the architect, he went to Cairo, he tried to understand the portfolio of local architecture, and he designed a beautifully new design, but you certainly, you can have a feeling and sense of belonging to that building. If I may give one example, beside the form, beside the envelope, beside the aestheticism of the envelope that we are so imprisoned into as architects, we should never forget that we are designing for a content. And the spatial cultural arrangement is very important. I'm using my own term, which is spatial configuration, this multi-dimensional space beyond the dictated geometric space that we are actually making it with an envelope to look beautiful or look fit, or with my signature as an architect, whatever. So what kind of spatial configuration of the needs of people, the needs of the community, be it at the scale of one building, the scale of one district, or the scale of a city, or even the scale of a territory? What kind of linkages between the spatial and cultural in order to have that sense of cultural meaning? And this is why in any project we need to prioritize. And of course, we need to think about accessibility, not about in terms of doors, but accessibility in terms of meaning, understanding, which kind of orientation, which kind of interaction between different parts of a building, inside, outside. And by the way, we're lacking now this gymnastics or this osmosis on how the building, maybe now the VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, this will not be difficult like in the previous generations of architects who relied only on geometry, perspective, and pencil with sketches. Of course, sketching is crucial, because sketching is an anchor of the visual to make some new resolutions for design. But however, we need to think about all these elements, in, outs, articulation of spaces, what kind of experience, and we can go far to simulation of that experience. I don't want to dwell much on that slide, so I will move now to another element which is new. I want to be provocative and bring you new subjects that are coming now rather than be in the past. So this question now of resilience, sustainability, and of course the climate and environment. I think not in terms of advocating the past, because we are from the region, but I think some of the buildings throughout the history of our region, they were devised with an amazing, clever responsiveness to environment and climate. Since our region, North Africa and the Middle East, we are located in a very, very hot and arid climate, and hence we were the first to generate a lot of solutions for environment, like the courtyard as an element for smoothing and cooling air, and of course the rammed earth techniques and other techniques like sirdab in Iran, or barjil, the wind catcher that we see in UAE and the northern Gulf countries and the southern of Iran. So therefore, how can we capture those lessons? Because this question of sustainability is not new. It's absolutely not new. Even Ibn Khaldun, when he was talking about Kharab al-Umran, or the decline of al-Umran, among the reasons was actually this question of non-adaptability of the building to its users. And of course, those elements of Kharab al-Umran, if we avoid them, then we're talking about sustainability. So how can we get to that sustainability? By learning from the genius loci, by learning, exploring not the pastiche or romanticized arches and domes, but the mechanisms and systems of how local communities they responded to harsh climate to provide a thermal comforts within buildings, and this also can be considered high-tech of its time. So to anchor this kind of know-how, in the left side, it was like a building or a project that won the Aga Khan the Aga Khan award. It's UHA Architects. It's called the Met Tower in Bangkok. So this building, it may seem very modern, contemporary, but just for information, in every floor, there is actually a system of wind catching through an ancient traditional technique in Thailand. And is actually integrated into the curtain or the membrane of the facade, and it's really working well for energy efficiency without relying on mechanical systems. So therefore, how can we activate, how can we synergize this local genius? And there is now issue of adapting technique and technology. And this needs some homework from our side, not bringing artisans to do pastiche-like elements. And I am so kind of some kind of disappointed by how be getting printed by 3D and just plagued everywhere on the facades, and it's just like plague, you know. And I don't think this is like the genuine architecture that wants to learn from its antecedents. So how can architecture be sustainable and contextual if its association with the world of nature and culture from where its terms is lost? What I mean by that, that means international innovation in terms of technology is to be sought, is imperative, but how can we guide it to a new boosting of local know-how to create a new internationalism? Why not? Based on uniqueness, based on local needs, like now the sustainability that becomes a UN Sustainable Development Goals. Why? Because the whole world community realized that we are destroying, we are actually annoying, we are polluting, and they think the built environment and cities, they are main cause of pollution internationally. So the two main things that we need actually to discuss here, this local global building know-how and this technology-based culture. And you see, I dare here not say just emotional culture, but I say two terms, they were antagonists, but now it's time to expose them. Yes, we can. Technology and culture. They may sound like one antithesis of the other, but I think it's time to embrace them both and move forward with an architecture of morality, ethics, and responsibility. What I mean by that, this is not just a responsibility of the architect. I know that architects, they are belonging to systems, they are belonging to national regulations, they are belonging to different kind of exigencies of local governments, etc. But yet, every stakeholder in the building industry is held responsible to reach that design that is more sustaining human establishment in the Middle East. Look, please, I don't want to shock you. I don't want to shock you with some social housing project in the Middle East. Look how our Middle Eastern cities, they are plagued with this social housing, with concrete boxes everywhere, no landscape, no gardens, no life, and it's sad. It's sad. So there is a certain morality, ethics, and responsibility from the side of all stakeholders to reach that architecture that respects the human sense and human right. And of course, now even in goal 11 and goal 9 in these SDGs, they are so important goals because they're asking us to respect that. So therefore, I would move to another dimension, that if I take the key sustainable development goals 3, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 15, 17, they are all close to the built environment. You could see clearly how the built environment and architecture is actually impacting every sustainable goal. This is what I mean by culture. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not here coming to advocate identity and romanticize about culture. I've done that in my career. I restored buildings and monuments, and I really liked, you know, the portfolio of the beautiful monuments, Medinas we have. But it's time now to think future about culture. Culture of sustainability, of resilience, culture of human behavior adapted to a space that is hygienic. And with COVID-19, we've seen the dilemma, how buildings and apartments, they are not fit for us to be confined. It's a major crisis. And we get so disappointed as architects to see that with this COVID-19, the built environment is not responding, unfortunately. So to move now to certain trends, what I'm talking about, this kind of cultural meaning, cultural construct, design processes. I'm not the only one talking about that. There were some amazing architects in the Middle East and North Africa, or the MENA region, who were predecessors in terms of advocating those things. They failed or succeeded. This is another matter. Please, the slides that are coming, I'm not here advocating one or saying this is good or bad, but this is an argumentation. So the first one, of course, our dear colleague, and Rasim is known among all of you, especially in his first part of his career, and of course, where I really liked his research action kind of project. There is no single project of Rasim that he was not deciphering the lieu, deciphering the milieu, deciphering the terrain, deciphering the vocabulary. And I think his first project won the Aga Khan Award. The jury members, when they looked at that mosque, they said, in Iraq, I said, wow, this is not about pastiche. This is a genuine architect who is actually dismantling, deconstructing, constructing, deconstructing, constructing, and then getting to an innovative high design that is not copy-paste, but in the same time, it has a genuine cultural experience once the project is implemented. I know there are critiques of Rasim Badran, don't get me wrong. There are so a lot of critiques of Rasim Badran. But as they say, as Caesar said, art is very difficult, but critique is easy. So we can take Rasim Badran as one of the schools of thoughts that we should all respect. And I think this an attempt from one of our living yet colleagues that we wish him a long life of what his contribution actually to that kind of pushing the agenda beyond the fragment, beyond the monument, and make it contemporary in terms of discourse and in terms of implementation. This is another trend that means now these questions, of course, regionalism and internationalism for the architectural critique professionals who are in the audience. I'm with you because I've done also my PhD in architectural critique. This discourse or whole thing prompted by Frank Frampton of emotional regionalism. What means true regionalism versus internationalism? But I think, to be honest, this is not our problem. This is a Western problem that was actually exported to us. But it becomes our problem, unfortunately. When modernists they go to internationalism, and then there was a loss of a sense of a region. And then some, of course, like postmodernists, where they try to encapsulate culture and they fall again into pastiche. And unfortunately, this is what our architects in the region, they are doing, unfortunately. Day after day, we see not only architects, but patrons and clients asking architects to make my building look Islamic or look Arabic or look regional or look local. But this locality of this region needs to be really well thought of, not to fall into the same discourse of critical regionalism and just to create pastiche. So what kind of design referential? How can we make our building contemporary, avant-gardist in terms of technology and smartness, but yet with an aesthetic envelope that is not pastiche or just a copy-paste of the past, or maybe just obsolete, ugly building of glass and aluminium like what we see right now. The third trend, this is, I mentioned it before, but it's good to visualize it through this slide. How this Islamic, Arabic, architectural antecedents, vocabularies, idioms are used in a contemporary curtain wall, like in this Foster and Partners mall in Abu Dhabi. So there is a paradoxical design. So is it just like coating? Is it just like a veneer or a surface treatment? Or is it something deep? I'm not against, the beautifying facades. It's in ancient practice, but yet we need to question what kind of ornament and what kind of content. And we know the difference between decoration or decor and ornament. The decor, what you see in front of you, it's just a surface decor. But ornament, any structural system that would be decorative and create from the main body and a motif, it's called ornament. And ornament is deeper than decor. So what kind of ornamentation based on the creativity of the structure system, and how can advanced engineering help us to give that? Zaha Hadid, I'm not here advocating her project, but of course she carved her niche as an international figure, and can dare even say that her avant-garde, but they have a sense of ornament with the signature of Zaha, but it's her vocabulary. But now, in terms of their adaptation to local needs, it's another matter. Or maybe just for mega projects, not for social housing, for instance. I've never seen Zaha, one of the Zaha Hadid's project for the social housing. I wished if she could design one, just to see how she will deal with the human needs. But yet she can be great architects for stadiums, theaters, and mega nationalist kind of equipment, facilities, etc. So the last trend, or one of the trends, and this is Mohammed Makia for the students among us in the audience. Mohammed Makia was an unbelievable architect, in Iraq, and he studied in different places. And of course, what good about Mohammed Makia, just to let you know, this argumentation around technology and engineering and its link to architectural realm is new, not new one. Mohammed Makia tried as an architect with an engineer kind of a background to encapsulate locality, but through his own materiality. And you can see this raw concrete or brutalism, and how actually he interpreted it even in a mosque. We know that brutalism was more about, really brutal kind of concrete, but he even actually included that within a new cultural interpretation. Forget about the dome. The dome is a dome, but I'm talking about the frontal facade and of course the structure system of the whole body of the mosque. And this is Kuwait City. And I think Mohammed Makia linking technology engineering to the design realm by exploring some local kind of meaning, he was indeed avant-gardist in that sense. One that without mentioning his name is Al-Marhum Hassan Fathi. Hassan Fathi, unfortunately, he was misunderstood by his own disciples. Though some of them, they are my dear colleagues, but I criticize them vehemently. Hassan Fathi, when he built with Al-Fallahin, and he built with the layman and of course with the local craftsmen, facing the bureaucracy of cements and or like oil. And of course he tried to reveal how the peasants and of course the farmers can build their own buildings by their own hands. He was not looking for a romanticized cultural form as his disciples they pursue, but he was actually trying to face and resolve a major dilemma of local communities. They have been a crisis of housing. And actually what's ingenious about Hassan Fathi's architecture, it actually stems out of the womb of the terrain and the context and the community itself. And this is why it was genuine as an outcome, because it was like human experience, was about augmented cultural experience through these forms that he simplified. And he did not simplify it for him as an architect designer to create a signature or a vocabulary. You can go to his memoirs and read Hassan Fathi's memoirs carefully. He never claimed he want to be international. He worked for 40 years in Egypt. He was never recognized until he's done a small project in Texas, actually, and in America, where actually he was discovered. So therefore, this another dimension or trend of linking local technique to environment, to nature, to people themselves as users. And this is what we say now as participative approach. I think Hassan Fathi was really at his time ahead in terms of looking at sustainability, participative approach, local materials, and he's done several projects like in Gurna, Kharga market, or etc. So now, hence, we reach another dramatic situation. Of course, my colleagues, they may say, engineers, they say, this is wow, this is an engineering, advanced technology. We are getting crazy fantasist forms. But this is also having another problem, because in Marrakesh, we have some Alibaba lamps. They look like these fantasist buildings. No anchorage, no sense of belonging to anywhere. They may be as an aesthetic forms per se, they may be interesting. I'm not saying the opposite. But this is like too far in projecting just like fantasy for the sake of fantasy. And we need to be very careful with these post-Orientalists. If Orientalists, artists, they drawn our culture to make a caricature out of it, and they think it is not, or they are not Orientalists to blame now, is the post-Orientalists who are us, the contemporary architects, who are fantasizing culture and fantasizing some cultural forms and make them a drama, you know, just for the drama. So, and they think this is a very sensitive case, and don't know how this will, where it would lead to. It may be, if we are, for instance, in a futuristic city in Mars, or even in a surface Earth, we may have some futuristic forms. I'm not saying that I'm stopping the creativity of architects and designers to think about the future, but what kind of identification those buildings they will have right now, because the question of temporality is essential. The global local scale, I think among my audience today, lots of architects and designers, we are actually really trapped between the city scale as it was in the 80s, 90s until 2000, and between the high-rise buildings that they are claiming more an international fame, or they are not just claiming international fame, but maybe the future is here. All the cities, they would be just defined by the high-rise buildings. So what kind of linkages between these high-rise buildings? And they think I should congratulate the authority of Dubai. They started as fragmented buildings, but I think they've understood that those buildings, they did not create an urban pattern, and then they did a lot of effort from the tramway, of course, the landscape project, and the new now vision of Sheikh Mohammed for Dubai to make it more livable. I think they are making an effort now to anchor those international kind of trademark buildings, and in the bottom, you know, human scale, how they would create a human experience with a new culture. I'm not against Dubai here, because Dubai, as I've mentioned, can be also a laboratory of experimenting some architecture that would never exist elsewhere. You cannot go to downtown London and be fantasized. You cannot go to downtown Paris and be crazy. All European capitals, they are so conservative when it comes into architectural innovation. And hence we should be proud in the North Africa and the Middle East. We have both. We have very conservationist trends and we have very modernistic and avant-gardist trends. Well, this is why the region was always a laboratory for international architecture. Sustainability-based design, I will not dwell onto that, because students, architects, they are everywhere acquainted with that. And I think we are getting now to high performance building. Beyond the discourse of culturalism, contextualism, etc., I think now what kind of high performance of buildings, including all variables, the cultural variable, the energy variable, the resource optimization, the question of smart materials and which structural systems more innovative to optimize the envelope of the building, what kind of augmented experience inside those contemporary buildings. And I think this is the future. Indeed, and to be honest, this is the future. I'm not here claiming that Master City is an example, I'm just using this as a slide. I am very acquainted with Master City, so don't get me wrong that I'm trying to advocate one project on another, but I'm trying to say, thanks now to BIM, thanks to VR, AR, to twin digital, we can prospect, design high-performing buildings in all dimensions. And so now we moved from the computer-aided design as technology, and we are getting to artificial intelligence. And this is why it's very important to look at the possibilities of this artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and be more conscious about humans that we are designing for. We should stop our ego and our centered views of one sketch will capture everything, and you give something to people, they try to suffer to adopt your sketch in a plan. I think with morality and ethics, we need to be more responsible and responsive architects to the local exigencies and local challenges. And of course, now there are lots of tools that we can explore to reach that. So digital technologies and the construction 4.0, this is also, I'm not seeing it as a curse, but as a blessing. So what kind of construction 4.0 and the digital technologies they can add to us in terms of 3D printing of materials, of buildings, etc. And this actually can be through sensors, building surveying, drones, autonomous vehicles, BIM, nanotechnology, advanced materials, additive manufacturing, robots, advanced manufacturing. But don't forget, we are designing for humans. Like one student asked me, sir, what do you think about artificial intelligence dominating the planet? I said, it's up to us. It's like nuclear. It can be good for medical purpose or can destroy a whole country. So we need to be also smart to guide artificial intelligence and the digital technologies via the new trend of construction 4.0, but without forgetting that the human factor is the center of any design process to reach this resilience, sustainability, and smart. And hence, I will repeat myself because I am saying that to students and other colleagues, what this distinction between resilience, sustainability, and smart. For me, smartness doesn't mean in 2021 we are smart. In the 16th century, we were idiots. We were always smart. So the smartness is all about the smartness of tools. It's not about the smartness of humans. We are always smart. But resilience is deeper than sustainability. Resilience is the immune system of a community that is responding to any crisis and creates its endurability or its continuous temporality to be challenging anything that may happen in their territory. But sustainability just an engine to preserve resilience. And smartness comes there to boost the two as a continuum of energy efficiency and all the issues now we are prompting, like the climate change. And I don't want to get to that discussion because it could be subject of another lecture. So therefore, design for flexibility in architecture. I think we should now, with the means that we have and with the technology we have more flexibility in incorporating, encompassing all dimensions. All right, all dimensions: the sites, the structure, the scheme, the services, the space plan, the staff, the souls. Everything now can really be flexible in terms of how we design. But be very careful, we don't design for the sake of the design. We should not design only for the sake of a sheer signature, but we are designing for humans, and they will never stop conveying this message to all young generation of architects. And we should not forget our mission, okay, in terms of enhancing this resilience and sustainability. So this is just a modest conclusion. It's so important to assimilate local architectural styles, but by styles, I don't mean stylistic, that means prototypes or essentialized elements, but just vocabularies, if you may say, through a broad-based innovative architecture pedagogy rooted in the MENA with a global technological influence. Why not? Exploration of understandings of languages, customs, memory of place, and lifestyles as triggers for design. Our students or young architects, they are not equipped. They are not equipped by that. They have just like a pencil or an AutoCAD or computer-aided design, and they start with partie architecturale in the French realm, but in the Anglo-Saxon concept, the driving concept. And then in the process, they lose all the very essential elements: the community, the human use, the environment, the energy, the resource, everything. Differential to guarantee continuity in the augmented design and generate an augmented cultural environmental experience. Why not? Boosting the local know-how and technology based on culture in order to enable sustainable adaptation, not sustainable development, but sustainable adaptation, because we can adapt an apartment. If we get fed up with it, we go to another one that fits us more. So what about this sustainable adaptation? And this shows also the genius of any design or any new project, how the users, they will explore that building or that space to be continuous in terms of their use. And of course, I'm not here discarding the global input. It's very essential, but how to be, as they say, local. We are very global by exploring all means, all advanced technologies, but at the same time, being local, not through formalistic, romanticized couple of forms, but deeper than that, to enhance communities in their territories in order that they have that sense of place and belonging, to create an opportunity in all levels: environmental, economic, technological, and even, why not, in terms of governance. So I would end here. I've talked much, so and I will let the ground to the audience, or maybe the organizers, because they told me that they will capture a couple of questions they would ask me. Thank you so much. This is, I know it was provocative lecture, but just to open the eyes of the students and especially young architects over the region about some of the issues. Some of them they may know already, but some I try to underline them more to be seen and to be, why not, subject of research and design in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was a wonderful and rich lecture. I would like to pass you the questions of our attendees. Okay. First, we have a question from Mr. Mustafa. Wonderful lecture and very interesting point of view. May I ask about your thoughts, if any, regarding the potential of some recent advancements in artificial intelligence that allow designers to write algorithms to learn from existing historical works to synthesize something new and novel.
Do I need to answer one by one, or maybe listen to all questions?
No, one by one, sir. One by one.
One by one. Okay, so let me answer this one. Thank you. This is a very brilliant question, because this artificial intelligence realm, as you may know, all of you, it's a new trend, is a new thing that did not start with architectural design, but rather was for IoTs and all the smart city grids and smartness of other industrial activities. But you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So how can this artificial intelligence, through constructing algorithms, in both simulating what is essential from the past experience and for projecting a futuristic experience? And this is why this artificial intelligence is, if it's explored in the proper way, it may lead us to amazing resolutions for complex systems of buildings and cities and territories that we did not have before. Like now, the question of twin digital, and of course, if we can actually simulate an existing context and creating its twin digitally in the virtual reality. We never had that. We were going to the field and trying to study everything and stuff, and we need the time. For a professional to be a professional in the 1960s, they need to spend 30 years in practice of architecture in order to master everything. But now, the new generation of young architects, they can explore artificial intelligence actually through, and why not? They should contribute to formulating algorithm for either deciphering the existing or even projecting the future. And this is a very important thing. And in our school where I am now, the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Bangkok in Morocco, where we founded the School of Architecture, Planning and Design, this artificial intelligence, VR, AR, they are really very crucial in our curriculum, because we do believe that the young architects, they need to be equipped with the digital far beyond from the tools of drawing. No, but for when we say artificial intelligence or machine learning, I think we are into the future here, and how architecture itself, it may be a machine in the future. We cannot stop, evolution and progress. So we cannot stop it. But it's just time to explore this artificial intelligence in a proper way to capture the existing cultural experience and how to project it into future projects or sites or territories. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be focused. I know there are a lot of questions.
Please. Yes, Professor. I'm moving on to the second. Let me check. I had one voice. Yes. The second question is from Mr. Khairuddin. Why Moroccan cities are similar? We are building the same blocks everywhere, social housing. There is no specific touch. It's just a copy-paste. My question is this vision imposed to the architects and construction companies? What should we do to improve our cities and give everyone a specific touch that can be inspired from its own history?
Well, this is a pertinent question. Thank you so much. I think while you're reading the question, I was reminiscing about the speech of the late King of Morocco, Hassan II, may God bless his soul, when he gathered all architects in Morocco in his palace in Marrakesh, and he gave that beautiful speech in 1986. And your question was asked by the king to his architects. He said, excuse me, when I get a helicopter and you go from a town to a town in Morocco, they all look the same. Why we are getting to that linear, monotonous landscape without any local identity once But once in history, look at the regions. The architecture of the mountains in Morocco is different, or the towns in the north, they are different from the south. Like when you look at Chefchaouen and you compare it with the Qusur and Qasabat or Qasbat or Ait Haddou, or you go to Ouarzazate. You are right in this question. And they think this should be resolved by getting to give the people the right to present their own cultural meaning, which is now frozen, as you said, by the monotonous construction gurus. And we know how the real estaters and how the construction gurus, they are dominating everything now. Even the architect is now imprisoned within the industry by prefabricated materials, windows. And this is why we go to this international monotony. And they think local government, national states, and of course the national orders of architects, they should play a major role in that. We're not saying here that we are pushing the architects to be nostalgic. We're not saying here that the architects, they should go to traditional pastiche. They do it anywhere, and they do it in a very ugly way. I'm not talking about Moroccan architects. All the architects over North Africa and the Middle East, they have that inclination of getting to pastiche, Mosharabi plates, covering a facade. But I may say, if we relate the second question to the first one, through this augmented reality, virtual reality, cultural antecedents, what kind of human experience, what kind of expression, as I've mentioned, representation, transmission, and integration. And trust me, is exactly the way you tailor your pants or your trouser. In the past, there is no two garments, they were looking like each other, because the tailor was taking a measurement of your body, and then he will design that garment individually. There were now plan type or plan type. So we need to do some homework and push forward architects, engineers, the industry, companies, enterprises, and of course through strict kind of guidelines, not a regulation in terms of limitation, but to try to make regions and territories reflect different experiences, instead of having this really ugly housing monotonous landscape that is plaguing all our region, cities and landscape. And no one can actually say the opposite. And we all feel sad. How can we have architects, we have advanced technologies, we have engineering, we have tools. Before, they didn't have advanced technologies, they didn't have smart tools, they didn't have limited, materials, and they devised beautiful buildings. Now we have advanced technologies, smart tools, and we are creating ugly buildings. So something should be questioned here, why we've reached this state. And hence, a whole system of building and whole system of designing architecture needs to be sought in order to find this diverse, rich landscapes that portrays different regions and territories without getting to emotional regionalism. Next question, please.
I have two short questions. I'll read them together from Ms. Farah and Ms. Sana. What are the main challenges of the cultural anchorage, and what methods are known to assess the resilience of culture within architecture?
This is the main issue, how architectural students and architects would not be just like technicists, but how they may have an encyclopedic capacity to understand, grasp cultural messages. And this needs a lot of research. And our education systems for schools of architecture, they need to be very, very keen to integrate this dimension within the DNA of the genesis of that profile of the architect before it gets to the market. Because if it gets to the market, it gets money-oriented, greedy-oriented, design per se oriented, and then who cares about culture? Who cares about experience? So I think not the classical courses of history of architecture or the courses of Islamic architecture that I taught for years, not these courses, they are not enough. They are not enough. I think we need more to indulge into social innovation, cultural innovation, culture and technology, what the cultural meaning of forms based on constructive critique. Unfortunately, the curricula of schools of architecture, they are lacking this dimension, and we rush into the design studio without any backup in terms of intellectuality, in terms of consciousness to do a project, and this is why we're lacking this cultural anchorage. But again, the second part of the question that is genuine, cultural meaning doesn't mean we need actually to go to what we term now cultural heritage. Did you notice something in this lecture? I avoided even to use cultural heritage term because it's abused and used in the wrong way, because the term patrimoine in France started because of a problem, because of all the patrimoine was patrimoine of royalties, and then the people in Europe, they didn't have even buildings. They were just random buildings, very poor. This is not me saying that, but Victor Hugo, when he got to the tower of Notre Dame, and he said, look at the destitute, the poor, the miserable. And he was talking about Paris. He said, now I will rewrite you as a city, because he hated that city, miserable. And then a couple of palaces in the outskirts of Paris. And this is why they invented the term patrimoine, to protect these few buildings, luxurious, that are linked to more wealthy families. And I think in our region, we don't have that. We have Medinas, we have community-based planning. That was before even the modernistic city, based on the Athens Charter, that killed the city planning and made cities devoid from any sense of place, like Manford in US, when Sir write to Manford asking him, what do you think about the Athens Charter? He said, I see in your documents another bureaucracy that would create dictatorship in terms of how the cities they would form. And this is what we've reached. We've reached cities without culture, cities without soul, cities without soul, sense of belonging. And architecture is enhancing that emptiness. Really, I'm not exaggerating, and you could even feel that in your places everywhere in the region. So therefore, not cultural heritage as sacrosanct, but heritage as a dynamic living culture that would be synergized through advanced designs that would create a new culture. I'm not saying that there is only cultures with S of the past, but yes, indeed, we can also create new cultures. This is about the good project, architectural project that would create a new experience. And we can have a whole workshop on how to deconstruct culture to construct a building. It's really a dichotomy or a discourse that needs to be enhanced in the curricula of for training future architects. Next question, please.
Okay, Professor, thank you. Many thanks for Professor Hassan for your interesting lecture. We all know the massive interpretations made by the maxim forms follow function in the 19th and 20th century. However, can we say that the Gulf countries or the Arab countries in a general way respect this rule? If yes, do they remain reliable to their own forms? Or we can say that they are diminishing their real architectural style by following the modernism movement?
Could you repeat the first part? The first part.
Yes, sure. We all know the massive interpretations made by the maxim forms follow function in the 19th and 20th century. However, can we say that the Gulf countries or the Arab countries in a general way respect this rule? If yes, do they remain reliable to their own forms? Or we can say that they are diminishing their real architectural style by following the modernism movement?
Well, Yes, indeed. This is. Could you turn on the camera, please, to see the audience? It's good to interact with them, even if we may have less quality audio. Yeah.
Excuse me, Professor.
Could you turn on the camera, my camera, please? Because
Yes, sure.
You're on the control.
Sure.
Because I wanna,
Sure.
I wanna see, I wanna see them.
Okay.
You know, see. All right, please. Okay, this is
Okay.
again. So this is actually when I was in one of my chapters of an encyclopedia of contemporary architecture. I mean, I was asked to write a chapter, and then I've done a lot of research on things, and then I discovered one thing: we need to be very careful with the slogans and the expressions that came with the not only modernists. By the way, I'm not blaming modernists, because if you look at the origin of modernism, it maybe was criticizing also the symbolic of wealthy the palaces, and were trying to democratize architecture. So even modernism had its own raison d'etre. So, but however, the modernists themselves, they disagree among themselves. If you look at the whole international congresses of modern architecture, SIAM, les Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne, and how they split with the formation of Team 10 in the Meeting 9 in Aix-en-Provence. So what actually we should avoid those slogans. Some young architects, they just want to explore them verbatim, like less is more, form follow function, a lot of expressions like that. Because what actually is striking, because when modernists, they were so amazed by the Industrial Revolution, and how can these industrial revolutions brought us new systems of construction that are simplified. They wanted also to simplify vocabulary, but they fall into another problem. They were anti-culture, because they thought culture brought ornaments and symbolism of the big palaces, and they forgot the people. But they created a major problem. This is why Louis Kahn in America, he tried to restore the majesty of architecture through concrete. And you could see his project in the parliament, of course, in Dhaka in Bangladesh. So why I'm saying all that? Form follow question is a trap, please, is a trap. There is no form following function or function following the form. In our tradition, architecture was only a vehicle of how we want to be. That's simple. I know it's very complex how to achieve that, but it's also not saying that by an organigram, a scheme of functions, and that those of functions will become a plan, and that plan will build the 3D to make the envelope, and then we look for the facade. This is also a trap. I think in our region, with the potential now of advanced digital, we could have holistic design, putting in front of you all the complex variables that you want to respond to, and then through a very, very complex, innovative process, how to bring together the elements of the puzzle to create an experience. And then that envelope will come based on solutions of problems. And trust me, the architecture based on that will be more rich, more diverse, and more ingenuine, rather than to take one prototype, one volume, one rich composed kind of photograph, and then duplicate that everywhere. So the problem of the design process, I don't think it's about the form following function or the opposite. And also, I should be merciful for our colleagues architects. Architects, they are trapped also in the grid of the modern city. Like Jen Jacobs, when she said, "Look at this checkerboard city that's creating only rigid orthogonality." And then This orthogonality dictated for maybe security sometimes, or maybe sometimes for the city of order, create regulations. And those regulations create what they say in French, ordonnance, linearity of the facades, linearity of everything. We should not only blame architects, we should also blame the rigid regulations that created monotony and did not create actually diversity. The other thing is actually the property itself. You know, in the past, and run you are free in your property. The only condition in your creative design of your own house, not to harm or to be harmed. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. And there were 3 types of ضرر: الرائحة الكريهة، الصوت المزعج، والحرمة. The eye contact or smell, bad smell or noise. But you are free in what you do in your property. Even we were in a very kind of interlocked urban pattern of a Medina or an ancient city. And this is why Le Corbusier was so influenced by the Casbah of Algiers. And the other ones like Van der Eyck and other ones from Europe, they came. And Le Corbusier, in one of his notes, I have it, he has the apartment in high-rise in Paris, and he has the roof terrace of a house in a Casbah of Algeria. He said, look at Europeans, they live like rats in holes, and look at the Arabs, they live in paradises, in gardens of roofs. And this is why he devised his roof garden. To get to the point, to answer directly your question, though I extrapolate my answers to make it more juicy for the audience. So I should say, in the Gulf, I think they did not have an urban fabric. Yes, we may say Qatar was actually there, Souq Waqif, there was actually a hub, and Dubai, they had actually a little urban hub, but they were not like cité. They were not like you know, Fez, Marrakesh, or Damascus, or Cairo. They were just, you know, intermediary towns for trade, etc. But the backyard was all about the nomadism. But doesn't mean I should actually criticize them, because of the oil and the wealth, they wanted to invent the city. But the problem was temporality. They wanted to do the city in a very short time. And cities, they can be built in a very short time, but trust me, they can be only physical. And we need to distinguish between cité and civitas. Cité, the city comes from la cité or cité, and then cité needs to generate civitas, that means civilization. So we can have a city, fancy one, as a big mall like Dubai, but doesn't mean there is a civilization. Maybe we need to wait because temporality is needed. I don't say that Dubai will not generate its own culture. It is now generating culture, but it needs time to generate this culture. Therefore, I think it's not just about the form and the function, and we should be very careful with the modernistic mindset that I will erase all partitions and they have the free space and the space. You know, this Mies van der Rohe walls like curtains, and there is nothing in the middle, just his chair. I don't think this will fit our region. And we still have intimacy. We still have actually functions defined by. Sometimes we are very multifunctional in our spaces in our region, but we should not actually fall into that. You're right. Those forms of modernists that we want to adapt them into the region, and we show that I am a modernistic architect, but let me add a little Mosharabi or lattice work to make it a bit local. This is not nonsense. So I think we need to be very careful in terms of being holistic, responding to the human need, and the human need will every human, it's belonging to their territory and space that would generate their own experience and how their garment or their building or their house they would like to be. Another dimension, but I don't want to get to it, it's the nationalistic symbols. We see now that every country in the Arab or the Middle East region, we have the national mosque. They want to build this giant mosque. Every country they have one, or maybe the largest theater. So actually, why we are blaming Dubai? We are following Dubaization, if I use the term of my colleague Shishtawi, Yasser Shishtawi, and this phenomenon of Dubaization. We want to be local, respect locality, but at the same time, we are aspiring to be international. And we've seen that Sheikh Mohammed has succeeded, indeed, in terms of making Dubai an international trademark. But doesn't mean every city in the Arab region or the North Africa would be like Dubai in terms of a success story. So this is, I'm sorry, I tried to explore your question to give more information, but I used it as a medium to provide more information. Please, next question.
Yes, Professor. What was the challenge of architecture during the pandemic in terms of room layout, knowing that some people were condemned to stay in an apartment for a whole day?
By the way, actually, I wrote an article here locally in Morocco regarding this point. I think COVID-19 revealed how weak we are and how vulnerable we are. Look how those apartments, how they don't fit our needs when it comes to the crisis. We design apartments for large households, especially in the Arab region. We have large families, and they will not stop. They will continue to be large. And then apartments, they are made for 2 members of a household of 2 members, or families for maximum 4. And it's sad when you see that families, households, they were actually encapsulated within this apartment like a cage, and they are forbidden to get out. And that apartment is partitioned, a room of 2 meters to 3 meters. It's really sad. That means architects are designing their own space. They don't care about this multifunctionality of space of households. They don't leave any room for families to adapt their space by the way they want. And if they want to change, and we see the number of apartments and how families, when they get in any apartment, they transform anything. So excuse me, where is the architect? He's belonging to the community, and the community is transforming his plans every single time. I'm not generalizing. Of course, if you have an apartment of 300 square meters, this is another matter. But I'm talking about the middle class, 100 to 150 square meters. There is always, so architects, I'm sorry, I'm not blaming my colleagues architects around here or even in the whole region, but I ask them, please do some more homework when it comes to residential housing, and please respect people. Don't take people as stupid and then just follow the enterprise and as you say here in Morocco, promoter, the ones actually just building for the sake of building for being rich. I think there is some strict regulations should be made on this housing, should be hygienic, because in the COVID-19 we've seen that the housing compounds, they are not hygienic. Accessibility to health services is very difficult. The houses, they are not enlightened, and there is not enough light. There is an issue of the sewer system that can also contaminate people. The hospital is not anymore a concrete box, but the hospital needs to be now in every district, in every house, in terms of hygiene, in terms of also health accessibility. And this is also the importance of smart gadgets. And we've seen that how smartness could be explored by architects now to get all the houses accessible to health services and, of course, emergency interventions. So lots of things to be said about this, but I'm a bit disappointed because we were not ready for COVID-19. But if we explore COVID-19 in a good way, it can be a catalyst to revisit the way we design, especially residential compound, residential complexes, and how houses they could fit the needs of people rather than making a couple of windows in a facade to show how good you are as a designer. I'm sorry to be tough on our colleagues architects. I know they are not the only ones to blame, but I need to push them to give better designs for people, especially in the time of crises like the one of COVID-19.
We can't get enough, Professor, but for last, Amir Jaber needs an advice, a general advice for all the students.
Wow. The general advice for my dear students, be them in my school or other schools all over our region, that we really admire this region, North Africa and the Middle East. And by the way, this is just a political terminology, but you know, the Arab Islamic region. I think it's so important to be holistic, to be heuristic, to be intuitive, have really an encyclopedic mind to capture. I'm not saying that you'd be a scholar in every discipline, no, but just to be really having a vast knowledge on different parts. I'm not only one saying that. Vitruvius said it, you know, Alberti said it in treatises, and of course Ibn Khaldun. And remember, exploring all disciplines in order to find even just the selection of the site of the hospital. I mean, you could read what was done to get the right place where to set up the Maristan, the beam Maristan. So I think also you need to have a cultural capital. Using Bourdieu, not in the Bourdieu sense, but just like the capital in terms of not the culture nostalgic or just the cultural heritage of patrimoine as a sexy term, but try to observe people, try to understand your people, your community, your landscape, and get them. This is why sketching is very important, because you are trying to make interpretation of what you see around you visually, and then you memorize in terms of perception. And that kind of exercise that will give you a lot of vocabularies, a lot of elements that would help you to be very innovative in the design processes without falling into pastiche. One last message, it's actually, please be both creative, use the artistic talent, that is the classical one, but it's time that our students will be equipped with digital intelligence, but with content, with substance. Al-madmoon, it's not just like the crust, the surface, but the substance. There is the kernel and the shell. So what we are designing now is the shell, for the shell, but without kernel. So we need actually to get deeper. And the more you do it, the more actually complexity would become simplicity. And this is what means professionalism. And this is what means expertise. When complex things will become easy in your daily practice. And I think the sana, al-hirfa of architecture is very complex, and we should not undermine it, because we are creating the vehicle of life. We are also generating ecosystems for life. So we are not just designing stupid buildings, but we are creating life and ecosystem of life. So this is why we need to be very careful. I'm not here dramatizing or making the task very hard. Through practice, we can reach this holistic design that is very responsive, interactive, resilient, sustainable, and why not smart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for being our guest tonight and giving us your valuable time. Thank you for everyone who attended. The lecture is recorded and will be available on our channel in YouTube. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for following me.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.